For over 40 years, attorney Chip Nix has experience in personal injury claims involving the most serious and catastrophic injuries. Helping victims injured at work, at home, or on the road is attorney Chip Nix's mission. The law offices of attorney Chip Nix is committed to representing clients with integrity and getting the compensation they deserve. This evening, attorney Chip Nix discusses the legal issues that affect you most. This is Justice for You with your host, attorney Chip Nix.
Hello and welcome to Justice for You, where we talk about what you need to know if you have been injured or if you are being denied justice. With me tonight again is my good friend Kent Hunt to help me discuss automobile accidents. Kent, it's good to have you.
Thank you, Chip. Thanks for having me again. I always learn a lot in our discussions. And if you could, last week, I think we left off, or one of the topics that I thought was most important that we talked about was uninsured motorist coverage. Could you summarize that a little bit one more time for us, please?
Absolutely. There are two basic kinds of automobile insurance coverage that will help pay for somebody's injuries in a case. The first is liability insurance. That's what you might have if you're driving a vehicle, you hit somebody and it's your fault, then your liability insurance would cover that and would hopefully take care of all of the injuries and damages of the person that you hit. However, the other situation is potentially even more serious. Assume that you're driving, you go through an intersection, somebody runs a red light and hits you. Well, who's going to take care of your injuries if the person that hit you does not have any liability insurance? And that's where uninsured motorist coverage comes in. Uninsured motorist coverage protects you. It protects your family. Uninsured motorist coverage would pay for your injuries either if there's no liability coverage or if there's too little liability coverage. For example, if the person that hit you only has $25,000 in liability coverage and you have $25,000 in medical bills and you've got all these injuries, how will you be compensated? Well, that's where you're uninsured, and we call it sometimes underinsured motorist coverage, comes in. We recommend to all of our clients to get as much uninsured motorist coverage as you can, because that protects you, and usually the premiums are not that great.
Chip, how does the term subrogation, the legal term subrogation, fit into what we're talking about?
Well, subrogation is a topic that we deal with every day. This is what happens in an automobile accident. If you are injured, if you come to our office, you've been in the hospital, you've had doctor's bills, you've had injuries, and let's assume that you've got health insurance. It's either Medicare or Medicaid or Blue Cross Blue Shield or United Health. One of those carriers pays your medical expenses. So let's say you were in the hospital for a week. Your hospital bill was $30,000, but you had Blue Cross Blue Shield insurance. And Blue Cross Blue Shield insurance paid the hospital bill, or the portion of it that they're required to pay to satisfy the entire debt. Well, if we recover for you, then your insurance policy says you've got to reimburse the insurance company. It's the same way for Medicare, for Medicaid, for Blue Cross, for United, for TRICARE. It doesn't matter who pays your medical bills. If someone else pays them, they're typically going to be entitled to get their money back out of the recovery that you make in the case. So that's what subrogation is, Kent, and there's a lot more to it than that maybe we'll have time to talk about a little bit later, but that's what subrogation is. We deal with it every day, and we make sure that our clients are protected. We make sure that we pay the smallest amount of money possible to satisfy the subrogation so that our clients get the most amount of money possible. And that's, we take great pains and take great effort to do that. That's part of what we do. I'm afraid that we've got to take a break, Kent. Time flies. Thank you so much for watching Justice for You. It's time for a short break. We'll have more on automobile accidents and understanding liability after this break.
Hello, my name is Chip Nix. I'm here at the law offices of Chip Nix in Montgomery, Alabama. I want to tell you about a 20-year-old young man that we were able to help a few years ago. He lost his right hand in an industrial accident. We were able to provide a settlement for him that obtained two primary parts. The first thing we were able to do through the help of an artificial hand expert was to get him a bionic hand that really functions. And second, we were able to work with a financial company to provide, in addition to cash, $5,000 that will be paid to him on a monthly basis for the rest of his life. If you have a personal injury case, or if someone in your family has tragically been killed, call us. We will search for justice for you. Some people say personal injury law is all about the money. Well, they're right. It's about the money to provide a bionic hand to a young man who has lost one of his in an accident. It's about the money for a family who has lost a mother due to a drunk driver. Yes, for the law offices of Chip Nix, it is about the money. It's about the money to help people salvage a decent life from the wreckage of someone else's carelessness. Justice for You begins here.
For over 40 years, attorney Chip Nix has experience in personal injury claims involving the most serious and catastrophic injuries. Helping victims injured at work, at home, or on the road is attorney Chip Nix's mission. The law offices of attorney Chip Nix is committed to representing clients with integrity and getting the compensation they deserve. This evening, attorney Chip Nix discusses the legal issues that affect you most. This is Justice for You with your host, attorney Chip Nix.
Welcome back to Justice for You. Our topic this evening is automobile accidents. My guest is Kent Hunt. Kent, thanks a lot for coming tonight.
Thank you for having me, Chip. It's that time again, and I think we all learn more when you give us case examples. So could you give us a case example right now regarding liability?
Absolutely. This is a case that occurred in a county other than Montgomery County, but it was a serious automobile accident. I call them wrecks because when you say wreck, to me it means more than just an accident. It shows you more, it gives you more information. But anyway, in this wreck, our clients were in a car traveling over a hill. It was actually a bridge that had a hill to it. And they got over the hill, and there was a side street that came into the road pretty close to where the bridge ended. And an elderly gentleman cut in front of my client, and they collided, and it was a bad impact. My client is a younger man, had a 4-year-old child, and his child was in the car seat, fortunately, and was buckled in the back seat. So the child did not sustain any real serious physical injuries, but the driver, our father that we represented, had a fracture of the femur, which is the top part of the leg, and that fracture was through and through. It broke it completely in two. And so after the accident, we have a terrible situation where our guy was in severe pain. having a hard time trying to take care of his child in the car seat. Ultimately, our client was airlifted to the hospital because his injuries were so severe. And people at the scene of the wreck took care of his child, fortunately. And fortunately, he was well liked in the community, and some people knew him, and they took good care of the child. Mm-hmm. But in that case, who is liable? Who is responsible? Are there differences in the liability considerations between our client, the father who was driving, and his child who was in the back seat? Is there anything that the lawyer or the insurance carrier for the party that turned in front of them could say our client did wrong in an attempt to avoid liability? It became a fairly complicated little case from the standpoint of liability.
I could see that, and you know, probably to the untrained eye, nothing ever seems as complex as it is as once you get into it and involved in it, particularly when there's going to be liability money associated with payment for treatments and those kind of things. And it's
no doubt about it. That's right. Well, in this particular case, the insurance carrier for the gentleman that turned in front of my client claimed that our client was traveling too fast, coming over that hill, coming over that bridge, and that they claimed he should have been going slower. Now, what difference does that make? The older gentleman clearly pulled in front of our client. He was clearly negligent. There's no doubt about that. But what was the insurance company trying to say? They're trying to say that our client was guilty of contributory negligence. In other words, they were saying our client contributed to the cause of the wreck, and he was therefore not entitled to recover anything. Well, Alabama has different laws than a lot of other states. As a matter of fact, I believe Alabama is the only state in the United States that still uses what we call contributory negligence, Kent, and it's really unfair. In Alabama, if the insurance company could have proven that my client was 1% at fault, even though the older gentleman who pulled in front was 99%, if they could prove we were 1%, then they're entitled to get out of paying anything. Fortunately, we were able to convince them that our man was not guilty of any fault.
And see, that's where even though some people may think all these details make my head swim, but if it weren't for somebody like you who is able to stick with the details, then what would have happened there would have been no liability for the gentleman's part who turned in front of the other vehicle and resulted in all the injuries. There would have been no liability on his part.
There would have been no liability, and his insurance carrier would not have had to pay a penny, and that would have been, to me, a miscarriage of justice. Fortunately, we were able to get the maximum amount recoverable under that insurance policy. The other part of that case, other than contributory negligence, and let me say this about contrib. Alabama is maybe the only state that still uses contributory negligence. There might be one or two others. But most states use something called comparative negligence. Florida, Mississippi. In Mississippi, if you get in a wreck and it's determined that you are 10% at fault, but the other party is 90% at fault, then you still recover damages. But let's assume in Mississippi, in that case, the jury awards a total of $100,000. Well, if you're judged to be 10% at fault and the other party is 90% at fault, you would get 90% of the $100,000 or $90,000, and would a deduction of 10% would be rendered against you, which is a lot more fair than contributory negligence.
Does that mean that the young man was found not or could not have been found liable for any related medical costs? Does that mean that he was not liable at all for any of those?
Yeah, in this particular case, the helicopter bill was really high. As you can imagine, he had to be airlifted from the scene to a local hospital in Montgomery. All of his he was in the hospital for a long time. He had to have surgical repair of his leg. Is he going to have to pay the medical bills, or is the gentleman that's at fault going to have to pay? Well, if we could not have proved that he was not, our guy was not guilty of negligence, then either he or his insurance company would have been required to pay it. Let me say one other thing about the child. Could the child be held guilty of contributory negligence and not be allowed to recover if his father had been found guilty of contributory negligence? The answer to that question is fortunately no. A 4-year-old child under the laws of Alabama cannot be found guilty of negligence. A 4-year-old child is too young to be found guilty of negligence. So what about the child's recovery? This particular child had to watch his father taken away in great pain by a helicopter from the scene of this accident. Fortunately, he had people to help him on the scene, but he was emotionally traumatized. He was injured in the sense of bruises and that sort of thing, but his father had taken the proper steps to protect him, and his injuries were primarily mental and emotional. He had to be seen by a psychologist, he had to be treated, he took some medication. We were able to settle the child's case as well, and that case came out real well.
As far as the summary of the case is concerned, did subrogation come into play in this particular case as well?
Subrogation came into play in this case. In this particular situation, it was very unusual because our man's, let's call him Jim, Jim's insurance refused to pay the hospital. And the reason they did was because there was a policy that Jim had that said that if the hospital does not follow the insurance company's rules, then the insurance company doesn't have to pay. And what happened in this case is that the hospital neglected to send the claim in on time, and the insurance company refused to pay. Well, did Jim have to pay those medical bills? Fortunately, no, because we found a clause in that health insurance policy that said if the insurance company determines that the hospital violated the rules, then the policyholder, the insured, does not have to pay either. So we were able to protect him on that. And Kent, that's one thing we always do. We don't just settle a personal injury action for the money paid by the insurance carrier or paid in a judgment. We make sure that our clients are protected from anybody that wants to come in and claim later that they're liable for medical bills and expenses. That's one of the most important things we do, is to make sure our clients are completely protected.
And I just have to know from a citizen standpoint that that's most respected in your work, because the complexity of all this actually comes down to the billing and payment and all the paperwork. Everybody knows they're inundated with paperwork when anything like this happens, and we all need help sifting through that.
Right. I mean, it takes a lot of detailed study and attention to detail. Fortunately, I have a great person that works in my office that you know, and she is terrific at making sure that all of this gets done in the right way. So let's see if there's anything else we wanted to talk about. We've got to take a break in just a second. I think we've covered everything we wanted to cover in this segment, so let's take a short break. You're watching Justice for You. We've got more after this.
Hello, my name is Chip Nix. I'm here at the law offices of Chip Nix in Montgomery, Alabama. I want to tell you about a 20-year-old young man that we were able to help a few years ago. He lost his right hand in an industrial accident. We were able to provide a settlement for him that obtained two primary parts. The first thing we were able to do through the help of an artificial hand expert was to get him a bionic hand that really functions. And second, we were able to work with a financial company to provide, in addition to cash, $5,000 that will be paid to him on a monthly basis for the rest of his life. If you have a personal injury case, or if someone in your family has tragically been killed, call us. We will search for justice for you. I'm attorney Chip Nix, host of Justice for You. Justice for You applies not only to the clients we serve, but also to the community. At nixattorney.com, we provide answers to questions about personal injury with direct access to me and my associates. If you've been injured, contact me at 334-279-7770. Justice for You starts here.
We're back with Justice for You. Kent, let's keep talking about these automobile accidents, okay?
Well, how about another case?
Okay. In this case, our client, a gentleman, elderly gentleman, was hit from the rear at a traffic light. He was stopped at the traffic light. There was a red light, and a car came up behind him and hit him in the rear. Well, he was dazed by that. It was a hard impact, and he was dazed by that. He was confused by that. His son had to come and help him get out of the car. So I mean, you can understand he was in that car after that wreck for about 15 minutes until his son could get there and help him out. Then after the wreck, we had to make sure that he was receiving the right kinds of treatment. And so he saw an orthopedic surgeon, he saw a neurologist, he saw physical therapy practitioners, and he saw his family doctor who coordinated all of this treatment. It turned out that he wanted to see if we could settle the case as quickly as possible. The reason was because he was getting medical bills. He had insurance, he had health insurance, but the health insurance was not paying all of his medical bills. He was having to pay some of the medical bills, and so they started sending him bills. And we were able to get them to back off from that, explaining to them that they needed to wait until we resolved the case. But he wanted to see if we could settle it early.
Hey, Chip, let me ask you this. Since you mentioned that, does that happen often, that medical bills, and I'm assuming that it does because sometimes cases do extend because of the complexity like we've always talked about. So people do oftentimes receive medical bills while they're in the midst of having their
They do.
Yeah, okay.
They do. And let me just say this about this case is that there was nothing we could do about the fact that they were sending him bills, but we were able to stop the hardcore type of collection activities.
Right.
But we tried to encourage this gentleman not to try to settle it early, and this was the reason for that. I mean, we want to speed things along as much as possible, and we do that. We do not just sit around on a case. But this gentleman was elderly, and he had some injuries that really concerned me. And so we were able to talk him out of settling it right away. And guess what? It turns out that his injuries are a lot more serious than the doctors initially thought they were. He's going to have shoulder surgery. He may have to have neck surgery. It's real important that we are able to thoroughly investigate a case. Automobile accidents happen too frequently, but they're not simple. And certainly injuries are not simple. We do our very best to investigate cases thoroughly and do what is best for our clients.
And you know, Chip, I think this is true in lots of cases, and that is there's lots of pressure on people to settle quickly. And the reason that is because it's for somebody else's benefit, not their benefit to settle quickly.
Right. That's right. Insurance carriers do their very best to get you to settle right away. Most of the time when I talk to somebody for the first time, I say, has the insurance company contacted you? Oh yeah, they contacted me a week after the wreck, and they wanted to pay me $1,000 to settle the case right then. Mm-hmm. And that's what they want to do. They want to settle it too quick. Insurance carriers want to settle it too quick because they know the longer it goes, the worse the injuries may become for them, the more damages may be applicable. And so we want to get things done quickly, but we also want to get things done right. And we want you to recover the most you can recover. Kent, it looks like we're out of time. Thank you for watching Justice for You. You can watch Justice for You Sunday nights after the news at 10. If you've been injured in an accident or at work, call us, 334-279-7770. Have a great night and come back to see us.